1. Atlantis. Let's talk about the most famous sunken empire in human history that has obsessed explorers for thousands of years. Located supposedly just beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the Atlantic Ocean, this legendary island nation was a marvel of ancient engineering. But catastrophic natural events wiped out this ancient society in a single terrifying day and night. Tectonic plates shifted violently beneath their feet, triggering colossal earthquakes and megatsunamis that swallowed their entire world into the dark abyss. If you want to picture its massive scale, do not just think of a normal city. Imagine the sprawling layout of a massive international airport, complete with all its terminals and runways. Now, multiply that footprint by 100. That is the sheer size of the concentric rings of water and land that made up the Atlantean capital. The visual signs of this civilization were striking. You would see towering walls plated in strange, glowing metals that gleamed brilliantly under the sun. The textures of the city were a beautiful, jarring mix of perfectly smooth, blood-red stone and rough, black volcanic rock, creating a checkerboard effect across the entire island. Surprisingly, the power is not just their legendary wealth, but their sheer architectural endurance and speed of naval deployment. They could launch massive, heavily armored fleets from their circular harbors faster than a modern naval base can deploy a strike group. Their ships moved with an acceleration that defied the wind, completely dominating the ancient seas. You might think the danger of living on a volcanic island is mild, kind of like accidentally burning your hand on a hot stove or slipping on a wet pool deck. But here is what the ocean actually does when a megatsunami hits, and how it affects humans. That is when it gets truly terrifying. The water acts like a solid wall of concrete moving at the speed of a commercial jetliner, crushing everything in its path. Explain exactly how it inflicts damage? The ocean does not just flood a city, it completely pulverizes it. The geological fault line waits silently beneath the crust for centuries, building up unbearable pressure. Then, without warning, the earthquake ambushes the city's foundations, shattering the giant stone walls into dust. The roaring water spots the highest defensive towers and instantly annihilates them. Giant, churning waves chase fleeing citizens through the narrow, perfectly engineered streets. The violent surge attacks the inner harbor, crushing their invincible fleet into splintered firewood. Nature and humans endure an absolute meat grinder of crushing pressure, flying debris, and suffocating darkness. Yet, here is a bizarre behavior that completely turns everything upside down. Despite being a highly advanced, mechanical seafaring civilization, their most sacred ritual involved capturing wild, massive bulls barehanded without weapons, right inside their holy temples. But if you think a watery grave is terrifying, wait until you hear about the lost landmass that was supposedly swallowed by the Pacific Ocean. 2. Lemuria. Let's talk about a theoretical lost landmass that scientists once fiercely believed stretched all the way across the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Located right between modern-day Madagascar and India, this massive continent was thought to be the cradle of a totally different branch of human evolution. What catastrophic natural events wiped out this ancient society? According to the early geologists who proposed it, extreme geological subsidence and violent tectonic tearing caused the entire continent to slowly sink beneath the waves, drowning an incredibly unique ecosystem. To understand the sheer scale of this lost world, do not think of a small tropical island. Picture the footprint of a giant, modern shopping mall, the kind with hundreds of stores, indoor roller coasters, and massive parking lots. Now imagine a landmass the size of 10 million of those giant malls stitched together. It was supposedly covered in incredibly dense, vibrant green ferns and towering prehistoric trees. The textures of this world were wild. Bark that felt like rough, heavy sandpaper contrasting with smooth, damp moss. The landscapes were a visually striking explosion of emerald canopies and jagged, charcoal-colored volcanic peaks jutting into the clouds. The real power is the incredible biological endurance and evolutionary speed of its inhabitants. According to the original 19th century theories, the unique primates and ancient humans here developed specialized limbs for leaping through the canopy with an acceleration that would leave modern animals in the dust, adapting perfectly to a rapidly shifting, sinking environment. Now, experiencing continental drift sounds like a mild inconvenience, maybe like feeling a tiny rumble from a passing subway train while you sit in your living room. But when a continent actually begins to sink and shatter, that is when the true terror begins. The shifting crust creates massive thermal vents and terrifying underwater landslides that completely rewrite the geography of the planet, dragging life into the freezing dark. The disaster does not just wash over the land, it systematically destroys it from below. The shifting magma waits deep within the Earth's mantle, boiling and churning. When the crust finally weakens, the ocean ambushes the sinking valleys, rushing in with unstoppable force. The churning water spots the lowest valleys and drowns them first. Violent whirlpools chase panicked animals toward the shrinking high ground. Rising tides attack the shoreline, eroding the soil so quickly that massive chunks of ancient forest simply slide into the abyss. Humans and wildlife trapped on this sinking paradise endure a slow, suffocating erasure as their entire world is swallowed by the cold sea. Here is a bizarre behavior that turns everything upside down. The entire concept of this lost civilization was actually invented by a serious Victorian scientist simply to explain why a specific species of tiny, wide-eyed lemurs existed in both Madagascar and India. The next hidden realm is even more dangerous, guarding its golden secrets deep inside a suffocating, impenetrable jungle. 3. El Dorado. Let's talk about the legendary city of gold that drove European explorers absolutely insane. Located deep within the uncharted, suffocating jungles of the Amazon basin in South America, this wasn't just a myth to the people searching for it, it was a deadly obsession. The catastrophic man-made and natural events that wiped out the surrounding ancient societies were a brutal mix of invasive foreign diseases and the unrelenting, hostile environment of the jungle itself, which reclaimed the stone cities as quickly as they were built. To grasp the sheer size of what explorers were looking for, picture a sprawling modern sports stadium, the kind that seats 80,000 screaming fans. The mythical Golden City was said to be dozens of these stadiums wide, completely covered in blinding yellow gold. The visual signs of this civilization were striking: smooth, cold golden artifacts, perfectly spherical beads, and intricate metalwork that flashed brilliantly against the dark, wet, decomposing brown mulch of the rainforest floor. The textures were a jarring contrast between polished, pristine wealth and the rotting, thorny vines of the endless jungle. Surprisingly, the power is not in the gold itself, but in the extreme psychological endurance of the environment. The jungle has an uncanny ability to swallow entire cities whole, growing with a terrifying speed and acceleration that can completely bury a massive stone pyramid in just a few decades. You might think a jungle expedition sounds like a fun, mild hike through your local state park, where the worst thing that happens is a mosquito bite or getting mud on your boots. But the reality of this environment, and how it affects humans who enter it blindly, is a terrifying nightmare of dehydration, parasites, and madness. The jungle actively fights back against anyone trying to steal from it. The environment causes damage in the most insidious ways imaginable. The jungle does not fight fair, it waits. Microscopic parasites and waterborne pathogens wait patiently in the murky drinking water. When a human takes a sip, the disease ambushes their immune system, shutting down their organs from the inside out. The jungle canopy spots any opening in the stone ruins and quickly seals it with heavy vines. Tropical fevers chase the explorers, causing their minds to break down into terrifying hallucinations. The extreme humidity and heat attack the body, draining every ounce of sweat and energy. Humans attempting to conquer this space endure flesh-eating bacteria, venomous predators, and a complete loss of their own sanity. But here is the bizarre behavior that completely turns everything upside down. El Dorado was never originally a city at all. It was actually a person, a real ancient king who would cover his entirely naked body in sticky tree sap, roll around in pure gold dust until he looked like a living statue, and then wash it all off in a freezing alpine lake just to show off his unimaginable wealth. The next hidden realm is completely buried beneath the freezing, deadly peaks of the highest mountains on Earth. For Shambhala, let's talk about the mystical, hidden kingdom that is said to exist somewhere deep within the snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas or the remote valleys of Tibet. This lost civilization is deeply embedded in ancient texts, describing a pure, enlightened society completely isolated from the chaos of the outside world. The catastrophic natural events that supposedly conceal and protect this society are massive, unsurvivable avalanches and blinding whiteout blizzards that wipe out anyone who tries to find it without an invitation. If you want to visualize its size, imagine a massive, sprawling college campus, with its lush green quads, grand libraries, and perfectly manicured gardens. Now drop that massive campus straight into the center of a hollowed-out, freezing mountain. The visual signs of this valley are striking. It is described as a perfectly warm, blooming oasis shaped like an 8-petaled lotus flower, surrounded by terrifying walls of jagged, blue-white glacier ice. The textures transition violently from the soft, warm grass of the valley floor to the razor-sharp, freezing stone of the Himalayan peaks. The real power is their absolute mastery of extreme endurance and spiritual acceleration. The texts claim the inhabitants possess the ability to move through the freezing mountain passes at blinding speeds, completely ignoring the deadly cold that would freeze a normal human solid in minutes. Getting caught in a snowstorm might seem mild, kind of like shivering when you forget your winter coat on a walk to the grocery store. But the high-altitude weather that guards this lost city is a terrifying killer. It deprives the human brain of oxygen, causing severe hypoxia, confusion, and eventually, a silent, freezing death. How exactly does this freezing environment cause damage? The mountain waits for you to make a mistake. The sub-zero temperatures ambush your extremities, instantly turning fingers and toes black with frostbite. A sudden avalanche spots the climbers on the ridge and drops thousands of tons of heavy, crushing snow down the slope. The roaring wall of white chases the humans, burying them alive in a concrete-like tomb of ice. The sheer altitude attacks the lungs, filling them with fluid until the victim literally drowns in their own body. Humans who brave this terrain endure hallucinations, agonizing cold, and a slow shutting down of all biological functions. Yet, here is the bizarre twist that turns everything upside down. Despite being an ancient, peaceful spiritual retreat, the oldest prophecies state that the kings of this hidden valley are secretly stockpiling advanced, futuristic weapons to ride out and eventually destroy the rest of the modern world in a massive future war. Before we continue to our next lost civilization, it is time for our secret subscriber challenge. I will announce a secret question at the very end of this video. Only those of you who watch the entire video will have the clues needed to know the answer. The first correct comment will be featured in the next video. Keep your eyes peeled for the clue. 5. Roanoke. Let's talk about the infamous lost colony that vanished without a trace from the shores of North America. Located on a small island off the coast of present-day North Carolina, this was an early attempt to establish a permanent settlement in a totally unfamiliar world. But something terrifying happened, and catastrophic man-made or natural events wiped out this society. Whether it was a brutal winter, severe starvation, or an unrelenting wilderness, the entire population disappeared, leaving only a single word carved into a wooden post. To understand the scale of this settlement, do not picture a massive ancient empire. Think of a typical modern cul-de-sac in a suburban neighborhood, about a dozen small, wooden houses surrounded by a tall wooden fence. That small, fragile footprint was all that stood between the settlers and the massive, untamed wilderness. The visual signs left behind were chilling: overgrown, muddy footpaths, rotting wooden palisades, and the striking, deep carvings in the rough bark of a tree. The textures were damp, cold earth and splintered, weathered wood fading into the shadowy green of the coastal woods. Surprisingly, the power is the terrifying stealth and speed of the surrounding wilderness. The forest has the endurance to simply wait out any human intruders, quietly reclaiming the land and accelerating its overgrowth until it swallows every trace of human existence. You might think a failed camping trip is a mild annoyance, like getting a leaky tent or running out of hot dogs. But the danger these settlers faced, and how it affects humans, is absolutely horrifying. It is the creeping realization that you are completely cut off from the rest of the world, slowly starving as the freezing winter sets in with no hope of rescue. The environment does not just make life hard, it systematically dismantles it. The harsh winter cold waits just offshore. When the crops fail, starvation ambushes the settlers' bodies, eating away at their muscle and fat. The freezing wind spots the cracks in the walls and pushes the cold inside. Despair and paranoia chase the remaining survivors as they realize no supply ships are coming. The hostile coastal storms attack their fragile wooden shelters, bringing sickness and freezing temperatures straight into their beds. The humans endure the agonizing pain of scurvy, severe malnutrition, and the psychological torture of absolute, deafening isolation. But here is the bizarre behavior that completely turns everything upside down. When investigators finally returned to look for the missing people, there were absolutely no signs of a struggle, no bodies, and no graves, as if over 100 men, women, and children simply packed up and calmly walked into another dimension. The next lost civilization is even more massive, leaving behind towering pyramids swallowed by the deep jungle. 6. Maya. Let's talk about one of the most brilliant and mathematically advanced civilizations to ever exist in the ancient Americas. Located across the dense tropical lowlands of Mexico and Central America, they built towering stone cities connected by complex road networks. However, catastrophic natural events, primarily severe, centuries-long megadroughts combined with man-made deforestation, systematically wiped out this ancient society. Their massive reservoirs dried up, the crops died, and the great cities were completely abandoned to the jungle. If you want to grasp the massive size of their city centers, picture a modern downtown financial district with its towering skyscrapers and giant concrete plazas. Now replace those glass towers with massive, stepped limestone pyramids that rise hundreds of feet into the air. The visual signs of their presence were incredibly striking: blindingly white stucco walls painted with brilliant, blood-red cinnabar and vivid turquoise blue. The textures were a mix of deeply carved, rough limestone hieroglyphs and perfectly smooth, polished jade artifacts. The real power is their incredible mathematical endurance and astronomical calculation speed. They could accurately predict solar eclipses and planetary alignments centuries in advance, possessing an understanding of deep time that rivals modern computer modeling. Dealing with a drought might sound mild to us, kind of like when your local government asks you not to water your lawn for a few weeks in the summer. But when a true megadrought hits a massive civilization, it is a terrifying, slow-motion apocalypse. The lack of water fundamentally breaks down the human body, turning the blood thick and shutting down the kidneys. How does a megadrought cause such devastating damage? The changing climate does not attack all at once. It patiently waits. The blazing sun ambushes the exposed, deforested farmland, baking the soil into useless, hard clay. The scorching drought spots the last remaining watering holes and evaporates them completely. Famine and starvation chase the citizens out of the glorious cities and into the hostile wilderness. The extreme heat attacks the weak and the young, slowly draining the moisture from their bodies. Nature and humans endure a brutal, agonizing collapse as the social order completely disintegrates into violent warfare over the last few drops of muddy, stagnant water. Here is a bizarre fact that turns everything upside down. Despite building some of the most massive and complex stone monuments in human history, they accomplished all of this without ever inventing the wheel or using any metal tools, relying entirely on incredibly sharp volcanic glass. The next ancient society is even more mysterious, possessing modern conveniences thousands of years before anyone else. 7. Indus Valley. Let's talk about a forgotten empire that was arguably the most peaceful and well-planned civilization of the ancient world. Located in the vast floodplains of modern-day Pakistan and northwest India, this society thrived on the banks of a massive river system. But catastrophic natural events wiped out this ancient society when the tectonic plates shifted deep underground. This caused massive earthquakes that literally changed the course of the rivers, drying up their life-giving waters and forcing millions to abandon their perfectly engineered grid cities. To visualize the size of their cities, imagine a sprawling modern suburban subdivision, with straight, perfectly parallel streets and identical brick houses stretching for miles. That is exactly what their cities looked like over 4,000 years ago. The visual signs were striking in their total uniformity, millions of perfectly baked red mud bricks, all manufactured to the exact same standardized dimensions. The textures were smooth, baked clay and elaborate stone seals carved with mysterious, unrecognizable animal symbols. Surprisingly, the power is their unparalleled urban planning and architectural endurance. They engineered complex underground sewage systems and trash collection networks with a speed and efficiency that European cities would not achieve until the 19th century. Having a river change course might seem like a mild inconvenience, maybe like a frustrating road detour on your morning commute to work. But when a desert civilization loses its only water source, the danger is absolute and irreversible. Without the river, the entire agricultural backbone collapses, turning a thriving metropolis into a scorching, unlivable dust bowl. The environment causes damage through silent, relentless suffocation. The shifting tectonic plates wait deep beneath the earth. When they finally snap, the earthquake ambushes the riverbed, tilting the land and forcing the water away. The harsh sun spots the exposed agricultural fields and bakes them into dust. Relentless sandstorms chase the retreating population out of their homes. The extreme desertification attacks the once fertile soil, burying the meticulously planned streets under millions of tons of suffocating sand. Humans and wildlife endure a complete ecosystem collapse, forced to pack up their entire lives and march into the unknown just to find a drink of water. Here is the bizarre behavior that completely turns everything upside down. In over a century of digging up these massive, wealthy cities, archaeologists have never found a single palace, a grand temple, or any evidence of a king, suggesting this might have been the world's first massive, wealthy society completely without a ruling elite. The final lost civilization on our journey left behind giant sentinels staring out at the sea, guarding a terrifying ecological warning. 8. Rapa Nui. Let's talk about the most isolated piece of inhabited land on the entire planet, also known as Easter Island. Located perfectly alone in the vast emptiness of the southeastern Pacific Ocean, this tiny speck of land was home to a brilliant Polynesian society. Catastrophic man-made and natural events wiped out this ancient society through absolute ecological suicide. They systematically cut down every single tree on the island, triggering massive soil erosion, starvation, and a complete collapse of their magnificent civilization. To understand the size of this island, do not think of a massive country. Imagine the size of a large international airport and its surrounding parking lots. You could drive across the entire island in less than 30 minutes. Yet, scattered across this small space are nearly 1,000 massive stone statues. Visually, these statues are incredibly striking, towering figures carved from yellowish-gray compacted volcanic ash, featuring deep-set eyes, massive elongated noses, and some wearing giant, red stone hats. The texture of the island is rugged, windswept grass contrasting with the rough, porous volcanic rock. The real power is the sheer physical endurance and mechanical acceleration of the people who moved these giants. Using nothing but ropes and manpower, they managed to walk statues weighing up to 80 tons across miles of rugged terrain with shocking speed and precision. You might think cutting down a few trees is a mild issue, like pruning the bushes in your backyard or clearing a small lot for a new house. But completely deforesting an isolated island is a permanent death sentence. Without trees, there are no canoes to catch fish, and without roots, the topsoil simply washes into the ocean, meaning absolutely no food can grow. The environment causes damage by turning into an inescapable prison. The ecological collapse waits patiently as the last tree falls. Then, the heavy rains ambush the unprotected dirt, washing all the nutrients straight into the sea. The barren landscape spots the remaining survivors and offers absolutely no shelter from the elements. Extreme famine and starvation chase the trapped inhabitants across the tiny island. The relentless ocean winds attack the remaining fragile crops, drying them out completely. Humans and nature endure an absolute nightmare of trapped isolation, leading to violent tribal warfare and terrifying desperation. But here is the final bizarre fact that turns everything upside down. Those famous giant stone heads that everyone recognizes are actually completely attached to massive, intricately carved stone bodies buried dozens of feet under the dirt. Meaning we have only been looking at the very top of these monstrous monuments all these years. We have reached the end of our journey exploring every lost civilization that actually existed explained. Here is the secret question. Which ancient city was supposedly built as a giant, 8-petaled lotus flower hidden inside a hollowed-out freezing mountain? Leave your answers in the comments section. Thank you for exploring with me. Stay curious and watch your step.